Hey everybody, Jacob here from Blind Spectrum, and today we're going to be talking mechanical keyboards. So let's start by defining the difference between a mechanical and non-mechanical keyboard. Starting with the non-mechanical, also sometimes called membrane keyboards. When you press a key on one of these, it hits a thin plastic membrane with electrical contacts on it, pushes that through a hole, which then interrupts a circuit for that key. The keyboard then sends the signal for that key to your computer. On a mechanical keyboard, each key has its own individual spring-loaded switch. Now let's move into some key terminology we're going to need to know before we start looking at different types of mechanical switches. The first thing we need to know is the actual switch technology, the actuation force, actuation distance, and the total travel distance of the key. For the switch technology, there's two. There is linear and there is tactile. Linear switches simply go up and down with no additional tactile feedback involved. These are your most basic mechanical switches, nothing really fancy about them. Tactile switches, on the other hand, have an additional tactile bump when you press them to let you know you've pushed far enough to actuate the key. Actuation force is actually how hard you have to press down on the key to get it to move. Actuation distance is how far the key has to move before it sends the signal for that key to your computer. And the total travel distance of the key is how far the key can go before it bottoms out and can't go any further. So let's look at some of the Cherry MX series of switches, which are the most popular switches on the market today. Other companies like Razer and Logitech do market their own proprietary switches, but since Cherry MX can be used by multiple manufacturers, we're going to focus on them as that's most likely what you'll be seeing. Let's start with the Cherry MX Black switches, which are linear switches with a 60 gram actuation force and a 2 millimeter actuation distance and a total travel of 4 millimeters. These are marketed for point of sale stations such as cash registers, not for gamers or writers who are going to be doing a lot of really fast typing. Especially multiple key presses can become quite taxing with such a high actuation force. The Cherry MX Red switches, however, were marketed for gamers and are again linear, but have an actuation force of 45 grams, not 60. Again, though, it has a 2 millimeter actuation distance and a 4 millimeter total travel distance. The Cherry MX Brown switches are very similar to Reds, except that they are tactile, not linear. And they again have a 45 gram actuation force with a 2 millimeter actuation distance and a 4 millimeter total travel distance. These were marketed as special ergo soft keys, but quickly became very popular and so are now among the top among the Cherry MX colors. The Cherry MX Blue keys are much heavier than other keys, but are again tactile, and not just tactile, but clicky tactile, which means that they have an extra piece in there that is designed to hit the bottom of the key once it actuates, creating a very loud clack. These are very loud keys. I would not recommend using a keyboard with these keys in an office environment or in any environment where you need to keep quiet, because they'll be very distracting. Now these have a 50 gram actuation force, but again a 2 millimeter actuation distance and a 4 millimeter total travel distance. These are not recommended for gamers because the release point and the actuation point are staggered, with the release point being higher than the actuation. So it has to travel back up before you can press the key again, versus the other keys where the actuation and the release are at the same level. It's very important to remember if you're looking into this specifically for gaming. Some less common Cherry MX colors are the silent red or pink, which is exactly like the red except that it has a rubber piece in there that dampens the sound of the key, because all mechanical keys will make some sound, but the reds are already quiet, but the silent ones are almost completely silent, very much like a membrane keyboard. The Cherry MX Speed or Silver are actually what I'm using currently, and I heartily recommend them to anybody. They're very much like the reds, except their actuation distance is 1.2 millimeters instead of 2 millimeters. So much shorter, and you can type much faster. And we also have the Cherry MX Clear, which are much like the browns, except they have a 65 gram actuation force instead of a 45 gram actuation force. So they're much heavier. There are other colors, but those are mostly for specific keys on other specific colors. And finally, let's take a quick look at some key advantages and disadvantages to owning and using a mechanical keyboard. On advantages, we have that they're much more durable, meaning that the keys themselves will not wear out as quickly. They'll keep that same feel for a long time, even after years of extensive use. They last a lot longer. Each key on them is rated usually from 30 million to about 80 million key presses per key, which is pretty significant, over about 5 million per key on the membrane keyboards. And the tactile feedback, which is not only pleasant to have, but can also be very beneficial during long typing sessions. On the disadvantages, we do have the costs. They do cost a lot more, anywhere from $70 on the very low end to maybe close to $300 on the high end, which is very expensive, especially for a keyboard. But if you're going to be using it a lot, I would definitely say the investment is worth it. If not, maybe don't invest that money. If you're only going to be using your keyboard every once in a while, I wouldn't recommend it. And also there's the weight and the size of the keyboards that can be a bit bigger, especially if you have extra keys, and the weight can make them a bit clunkier to transport. And finally, some of them do take up multiple USB slots. So if you don't have a lot of USB slots on the back of your computer, or you're not willing to use up the front slots on your computer if you have those available, then you may want to look at one that doesn't have lights, because the lights are usually where that extra USB cable comes in to power those. So if you don't have the USB real estate to afford to take up one slot with a cable just for lights, you can either leave that one unplugged if you determine which one is the proper one, because they're usually not labeled, at least anyway I've noticed. Or you can just look for one that doesn't have any lights and just have the one cable. And that's it, everybody. Everything you need to know about mechanical keyboards, specifically the Cherry MX line of keyboards. If you like this video, remember to like, comment, subscribe, hit the little notification bell down there, and I will see you guys next time.